So, during the reforms of Alexander II, three major groups emerged among these intellectuals, very influential people. First, let's start from the middle, Westernizers, who supported Alexander II, who started thinking that Russia should be like a Western country. So Russia should follow the Western models like Britain. Ideally, Russia should become a constitutional monarchy. We don't want to abolish monarchy. Some of them, I assume, nourished some Republican ideas, but not many. They said, it's enough for us to become a constitutional monarchy, but all our political system, social system, economic system should imitate Britain. That is why a lot of people are Anglophiles among these people. If you read, for instance, a famous classical book, Turgenev, Fathers and Sons. You don't have time, of course, to read it, but go to Wikipedia, read about this book, and that's what we do these days. You will find out the content of the book. It's basically a story about an progressive aristocrat, old progressive aristocrat, who wanted Russia to become like England, and he debates a young guy who belonged to this group I will mention, who was more radical. Okay? And they talk about religion, economic system. So it's a good book that describes what Russia was at that time. Okay, Westernizers. So we're going to continue what Peter the Great started, only we need to do it in a constitutional way. And peasants should be liberated, factories should be encouraged. Let's draw capital from the West, invite Western banks, companies. Okay, that was their ideal. The second group was so-called Slavophiles. It's people who became upset about this quick modernization, Westernization of Russia. People who said, oh, Mother Russia is going to hell. So we should be loyal to Russian Orthodox Church. Peasant commune might be eroded somehow. The divine origin of the Tsar power, it's our backbone of the Russian culture. We should be loyal to traditions of our ancestors. We should teach people to be loyal to traditional values. What is this traditional values? We mentioned this last time when under Nicholas I they created this theory of official nationality. Remind to us.
So there was the autocracy, which everything was the Tsar.
Everything is about the Tsar.
All right. Then the Orthodox Church and fidelity to the religious practices of the Orthodox Church. And then the third leg was a Russification of trying to, that this was the Russian people, the Russian, who we were as the Russian people, our national character.
Yes, correct. And for instance, popular writer who became prominent in Russia in the West, Fyodor Dostoevsky. You heard about Dostoevsky? Dostoevsky, it's I have to find an American analogy. Reforms that jump-started modernization of Russia, further Westernization, the Tsar Liberator, who was more lenient toward aspirations of reformers. Okay? He was, of course, not against abolition of his regime, but at the same time he realized the need to modernize Russia for geostrategical purposes, because the fear was that during the next war Russia might lose if something like Crimean War might happen. Okay. We also mentioned that a debate was going on in Russia about which way Russia should go. Okay. And that's when I brought these two words to your attention, Slavophiles and Westernizers. Now we're going to talk more about these people, okay? And also the second part of our conversation, we will start talking about so-called populists populists, it's revolutionaries who sympathize with socialism. Okay. First, we have to bring again to our attention, and I did mention it last time, this word intelligentsia. Okay, intelligentsia, it's a Russian word which later became adopted in Western usage. Okay, describes a small group of people amid the sea of illiterate people. Okay, normally in a semi-backward country, economically speaking, a group of intellectuals who are concerned about the well-being of so-called common people, who are contemplating about the future of this semi-developed country or underdeveloped country. And I'm talking about intelligentsia now in abstract terms, purposely, because what we could observe in Russia since 1830s and well into the early 20th century could be equally applied to other non-Western countries or semi-Western countries or non-European countries that had to respond to the so-called Western challenge. Okay, because, and I emphasize this again, I emphasized this last time and I want to emphasize this again. If you, for instance, study the history of China, you will see that there was a similar debate between people who wanted to modernize China and those who tried to embrace the old Confucian tradition and trying to shield China from Western influences. Or in China it started later than in Russia. In China it started in early 20th century. If you go to India, the same thing, same debate. If you go to Vietnam, same debate. Okay. Latin American countries, you might observe similar notions. Okay, how to respond. Or if you go to semi-developed countries of Eastern Europe, like Greece, Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, you will see a similar situation later. How do we need to respond to the Western challenge? And intellectuals or intelligentsia divided in two groups: those who wanted to embrace so-called Western, blindly Western tradition, and those who opposed this. Okay. That's how it is. To the present day, you may see it in third world countries, for instance. In 1960s, 1970s, when newly liberated countries like Tanzania, Zambia had to respond also to Western civilization, they similarly became split. There was a group of people who wanted to embrace the Western tradition, and those who said, "Oh, our tribal, communal tradition is so precious, it's unique, don't touch it." You can even observe this philosophy to the present day in Russia. Still, we have the same debate, only in a different format. Even in the United States, strange as it may sound, you may find this. Take, for example, this mainstream ideology of multiculturalism that is currently dominant in U.S. discourse. It also focused on the severe critique of Western civilization. It literally hates Western civilization with individualism, capitalism, and it kind of romanticizes non-Western cultures. We need to embrace them, we have to learn from them because they have ecological wisdom. And the opposite tradition, let's say conservative libertarian, that criticizes this, and each side tries to smear each other with dirt. That's the debate which is going on. So it's interesting to observe throughout history. Anyway, going back to Russia. So it's a thin group of educated people, mostly from nobles and town burghers or town residents. Some of them were offsprings of this well-to-do people, okay? Aristocrats, but who felt sorry for the plight of the peasants and wanted to help somehow to ease the plight of serfs, especially this notion we need to help common people became widespread before 1861, before the abolition of serfdom. Okay, we need somehow to change Russia. How to change it? And that's where debate started. I also want to draw attention, and we're going to talk about it, that Westernizers were not unlike Slavophiles, who were pretty much common, and we're going to discuss key points of Slavophiles. Westernizers were eventually separated, split in two groups: liberals, or classical liberals, people who wanted to plant in Russia classical liberalism, blindly embrace Western tradition. We need to copy England, for instance. England was especially popular, so some people even imitated English fashions, English tea, it became a fad. And radicals, many radicals later became populists. It has nothing to do with the American version of populism. Okay, so don't mix these two words. Russian populists, these were socialists. I guess only in this case American populists could be compared with Russian populists. So both groups did sympathize with socialism. But in all other respects they were different, because Russian populists, they believed in peasant commune. They believed in peasant revolution. And we will discuss this. First, we need to outline these two big groups, two big factions, Slavophiles and Westernizers. What separated them? Slavophiles' key points are here, and the portrait of one of the founders. There were many founders, actually, about a dozen people, writers, journalists, who contributed to the rise of this philosophy. But one of the prominent people who jump-started this movement, Slavophiles, Aksakov, Konstantin Aksakov. So it's a critique of Peter the Great. So they believe that since Peter the Great, Russia went the wrong way. Russia is a unique country. That was their starting point. Unique. You cannot compare it with any other country. Okay. Russia has its own way. Okay. But unlike this rotten West, which is involved in the developing of capitalism, egotistic people in the West divided the classes, and the classes compete with each other, and it's not good. Anarchy, capitalism, market creates this anarchy. It upsets people. It upsets the national unity. Organic. They like. I forgot to write it down. Organic. The word organic unity, organic soil. In fact, in Russian, Slavophiles are called so-called почвенники, soil people. That's their label, soil people, or people of soil. Blood and soil. Sounds familiar. That's what they wanted, because many of these Slavophiles, they were raised on German philosophy. They read German romantic authors, German romanticism. German romanticism. They were not just village hicks or rednecks. No, despite all these things which they preached. They were highly educated people who lived in Europe, but again, they became attracted to this German romantic philosophy that glorified Middle Ages. Of course, in Russia, they didn't have this European type Middle Ages. So they came to glorify Russian peasant way of life. and Russian Orthodox Church, okay? And the Russian commune, Russian peasant commune, okay? So Europe, look at Europe. Europe is rotten. Capitalism is coming. But we in Russia, we preserve a collective community of peasants. And it's good. We don't need to break it apart. And that's where they differ in their views from Westernizers, because a large chunk of Westernizers, not all of them, a large chunk of Westernizers, especially classical liberals, they believe that peasant commune should be broken apart. Russian peasants, like American farmers, they should become independent homesteaders, okay, and it should be good, okay. Private property is sacred, okay. That's what classical liberals, Westernizers argue, okay. At least one of the factions, okay. Okay, just a picture of the major weekly newspaper called The Day. The Day. Russian society should be based on loyalty to the enlightened despot, the Tsar. That's the Russian tradition. We shouldn't fight against this. It's not good. Constitutional monarchy is evil because the monarch, it's like a middleman, like an umpire, okay? He is a benevolent person who doesn't depend on any classes of people. Of course, here, personally, I disagree with them because Russians are defended the interest of a particular class of people. You don't need to be a Marxist to argue this. So anyway, and also Russian peasant commune should be the cornerstone of this society. Plus, this society, organic society, that is commonwealth of peasant communes, should be based on the Russian Orthodox Church. That's our spiritual foundation, okay? Social foundations, collective commune. Spiritual foundation is Russian Orthodox faith. Especially they amplified the concept of so-called sobornost. This word sobornost, it means collective salvation. Okay, like in Catholic Church, in the Russian Orthodox Church, in Greek Orthodox Church in general, because Russian Orthodox Church is part of Greek Orthodox Church, they emphasized collective salvation. Okay, unlike Protestant ethic, Protestant Church, where the emphasis is put on individual salvation. Right? You know this, man. Max Weber, Protestant ethics, you know, and all this stuff. But here, sobornost, it means literally, a literal rendition means collective templeness. Again, the word templeness, it sounds bizarre, but collective templeness. So we're together in the church, we're going to be saved together as a group, as a collective. Okay. And that's what our tradition, and it was contrasted with Western individualism. Okay. But at the same time, they were against serfdom. See, here it was a big deal. These intellectual Slavophiles, they were against serfdom, and they welcomed, of course, when the Tsar abolished. But of course, at the same time, they criticized his program of modernization because they were afraid the Tsar's program of modernization, railroads and all this stuff, would create working class people, classes would be fighting against each other, peasants would be uprooted, so see. That's ambivalent attitude. At the same time, they advocated Russification. See, they were, Slavophiles evolved into Russian nationalists. They were against Poles, against all these aspiring minorities who wanted to create their own autonomy, like Finland. They were against Finnish autonomy, strongly against Finnish autonomy. They attacked Baltic German aristocrats, hated them because they thought it was wrong, and Peter the Great was really a rotten guy because He invited a bunch of German-speaking people and put them in the elite position. It's not good, because we're controlled by foreigners. That was their message to the Russian people. And of course, the more educated people they had in Russia by the end of the 19th century, the more this type of message became resonated with people. Because peasants essentially didn't care about this nationalism. They were more concerned about working on the land. It's educated folks, they started thinking about who is percentage, what percentage of Germans, what percentage of Russians were. So we need to balance it somehow, you know. People with a lot of time on their hands. People who work, do actual jobs, they have no time to discuss these things. But anyway, it's another issue. So became nationalists. In the long run, it wasn't good. So they planted the seeds of destruction. Little did they know they planted the seeds of destruction of the Russian Empire. Okay. The most popular event that boosted the spirit of Slavophiles was so-called Eastern Crisis. Eastern Crisis, it's essentially a Russo-Turkish war. Russian Empire and Ottoman Empire started to fight again. They were constantly involved in the fighting. We talked about Catherine the Great, who defeated Turks, was able to buy large chunks of their land, put them down successfully. But later, remember, Turks, Ottoman Turks recuperated, helped by England and France, defeated the Russians during the Crimean War. So now Russia wanted to come and help these Slavic countries which aspired to create independent states, because Ottoman Empire had conquered them in late Middle Ages. If you studied world history, you remember these names such as Suleiman Magnificent, when Ottoman Empire expanded well deep into southeastern Europe, even reached the gates of Vienna. On September 11, 1683, there was a big fight, you know, between Ottoman Empire and Austrians, and that was the time when the Ottoman Empire was for the first time rolled back. Okay. But anyway, Ottoman Empire didn't want to let these people go. These nationalities, Bulgarians, Serbians, Macedonians, Romanians, Greek Orthodox, by the way, Greeks, they constantly they kept revolting against Turks. So at this point, Serbia led the movement for independence among the Slavic countries. Okay, and to help the Slavic countries, Russia declared war on Ottomans and sent the troops. Although, again, England and France came to cut Russian teeth because they were afraid that Russia might expand again. So Russia did defeat Ottoman Empire in this war. It was more successful. Okay. Some of these countries, Serbia, what else? Serbia became the only independent country, received independence. The other countries received autonomy within Ottoman Empire, and eventually they became independent too. But at the same time, Russia wasn't able to give autonomy to all the Slavic countries. So that's when England and France played the evil role, so to speak, from a viewpoint of Russians. Okay? They intimidated the Russian government, and the emperor had to compromise. Okay. Autonomy for several Slavic countries, independence for Serbia. But the job was done. Russo-Turkish War led to the rise of Slavophile movement. The spirit of Russian nationalism emerged. For the first time, it touched all classes of townspeople. I'm not talking about the countryside, no, of course not. We're talking about towns. See, before, when Nicholas I declared his ideology, so-called official nationality, which you know what was all about. It was like in the court, people, among a few people, not popular. Russification was not yet popular. But at this point, Slavophiles' ideals of Russification, promoting Russian Orthodox Church and Greek Orthodox Church, these slogans penetrated the wide circles of Russian residents in towns and cities. Okay.
Question?
Okay.
I have no idea where Kiva is.
It's something which I might need to skip, but I decided to include it. It's Kiva. Thank you for your question. It's a place in Central Asia, conquered by this guy. What's his name? Let me look at your quiz.
Is that the north?
Konstantin von Kaufmann.
It's part of the north, because you have a map over there, and I'm thinking, where is Kiva on that map?
It's not.
It's not.
It's not.
Like, okay, think like modern day Iran. I think like just go like up and to the east of it is roughly where Iran is.
Okay. Right.
It's a Central Asia.
Okay. No, the confusion is you have a map there, and I'm trying to.
Yeah, exactly right. Good question.
Yeah.
But I will explain to you why I included it. And I looked at the slide and I asked myself, why did I include this? But at the same time, part of me said, I do need to include it to show you why England and France wanted to subdue Russia. Because Russia.
It borders. It must be near Afghanistan.
Yeah, it's roughly in around that part of the world.
The point is here, this guy, Konstantin von Kaufmann, in the 1870s, conquered this big area, which became labeled Turkestan. Khiva, Bukhara, these principalities were part of this. It's southernmost part of Turkestan. What exactly you said, they're on the border with Afghanistan. That's where it is. And von Kaufmann gave them limited autonomy. So the Khan of Khiva was able to maintain serfdom there, whatever he wanted. The only promise he gave that he would be loyal to the Russian emperor. So Russia said, we are not going to interfere. So you will be formally part of Turkestan, but we are not going to interfere into your economic and social life. Okay, but in 1873, Russia made inroads into this area, and Khiva was declared a part of the structure Turkestan. Okay. Khiva started to lose her autonomy. Okay. Bukhara, Muslim principalities. And England was very much concerned about it, because England was afraid that Russians were moving so quickly, especially this guy, General von Kaufmann. He so quickly conquered this area that was labeled Turkestan. Khiva, I repeat, was part of it. That England said, oh, we have to stop them. And now they're moving here. Okay, that is why Russia was pressured to give up her demand to grant independence to the Slavic nations. Okay, these Slavic nations received autonomy within the Ottoman Empire, limited autonomy. Okay, Westernizers. But the reason I mentioned this stuff before is just to show you that how geopolitical event boosted the Slavophile movement.
Okay, so just we didn't look it up, or we can ask. The Treaty of San Stefano, and then the Congress of Berlin you've got down, and I'm not quite sure. Did one overturn the other?
Who read this? Did anybody read it? Go ahead.
It's roughly the Treaty of San Stefano set up all these terms that liberated like a whole bunch of land and gave it over to like the Russians. And then the Congress of Berlin stepped in to be like, no, Russia, you cannot get all that land. That would upset the balance of power. So it's roughly the Treaty of San Stefano set the new status quo, and then the Congress of Berlin worked to overturn that as best they could.
Westernizers, key points.
Thank you.
Russia is not unique. That was the message. Russia is a backward country that lags behind the European countries. and she needs to catch up. Because economically, socially, it's a backward country. It's caught in the grips of monarchy, and it's not even constitutional monarchy. Westernizers wanted to establish a constitutional monarchy. That was their ideal. At least one part of Westernizers. Russia was not civilized, it needs to civilize herself. Okay, modernization was okay and nothing wrong with this. One of the pioneers was this guy, Konstantin Kavelin. He was considered the father of Russian classical liberalism. Okay. But,
last time we kind of talked about with the liberation of the serfs and on a local level, there was some form of councils and representatives and things like that. What did they want to see in their constitutional monarchy that was super different than every town having their own council of elected officials?
that's what, again, I'm glad that you brought it up. Westernizers who embraced classical liberalism, they gave rise to so-called zemstva. That's what we mentioned last time. It's appropriate to bring it up again. Zemstvo. It's a local self-government or municipal, where landlords occupied the dominant position. So 70% of seats, people were elected or sent, like nobles elected their own representatives, peasants elected their own representatives, merchants, each estate was able to elect their own representatives, but 70% were reserved for nobles. So which shows that it was a very unequal representation. But still, it was some representation. And what just you heard, zemstvo, it means land rule in literal orientation, land rule. So people who exercise some limited autonomy on the ground, rule themselves. So Westernizers were the spearheads of this reform. If it hadn't been for them, it wouldn't happen. So they viewed it like this. Their ideal was that this local self-government bodies would send representatives to all Russian parliament. And they would advise, this parliament would advise to the Tsar. But of course it never happened, because Russian parliament was not created until 1905. Okay? But responding to your question, that's how they viewed this local self-government. Okay? Self-government did exist in local areas, but the parliament wasn't created. The Tsar had unlimited power. Okay? But classical liberals were not the only group that was represented among this umbrella movement which were labeled Westernizers. Okay? The second big group, it was radical Westernizers. Radical Westernizers. Interestingly, these radical Westernizers, they said, yes, the history, the movement of history could not be stopped. Russia was moving in the same direction as Western countries. Russia was modernizing herself. You cannot stop this. But, and that's what interesting about them. Here they their views resonated with Slavophiles, only in a different way. They said, but we don't want to create a situation like in Western countries where poor proletarians, industrial workers are exploited in the satanic mills of Birmingham, Manchester. Okay? It's evil. We don't need these factories. We don't need these chimneys. So what we need again to embrace peasant commune. Because in Europe they talk about socialism. And indeed, socialism, since 1830s, 1840s, started to spread all over Europe. And they read, French socialists, they read Henri Saint-Simon, it's a French socialist, or Robert Owen. Remember the guy who created the first welfare for his workers, who also created later here in Indiana on the Wabash River a socialist commune to show to the world how people need to live a life. Okay, of course it became bankrupt. Okay, but nice try. So Russian radicals, Westernizers said, we don't need to do this kind of stuff, what Robert Owen did on Wabash in Vienna. It's nonsense, because they're rotten individualists, they're Westerners, they're egotists. We already have this unit, collective unit, mir, peasant commune. So let's embrace it. That's, instead of destroying this commune, we need to nourish it, we need to polish it, we need to support peasants. Peasants, by their nature, they have this wisdom, which is inaccessible to us, educated people. Okay. See, we already observe this romanticization of peasant commune. Okay. Idealization of peasant commune. Only unlike Slavophiles who worship the Tsar and they said the enlightened despot should be in charge, Slavophiles. Radical Westernizers said, no way, this despot should be gone. He should be kicked out. So let's cut completely the top of the pyramid, the Tsar and nobles. Evil people. Look, they occupy 70% of seats in Zemstva created by these classical liberals. Okay. Not fair. They were right in this case, not fair. So we need to give power to peasants, to peasant communes. And future society, socialist society in Russia would be the commonwealth of these collective communes. That was the idea.
Why wasn't more money and focus put into developing agriculture, new better tools, fertilizers, all the techniques that were going on to improve productivity of the soil? That never seemed, they were always talking about factories and weapons, munitions, but they never seemed to be talking about producing more food.
Exactly. That's believe it or not, but they didn't talk about this at all. Okay. For instance, about helping to advance the peasant agriculture. For some reason, machines, factories, chimneys, it was like for them the embodiment of evil. Okay. So we need to kind of jump over this capitalist stage, and peasant commune will help us to live this life close to nature, to work on the land. Okay. It's a basically romanticization of this primitive way of life. I have to use this word, to make clear. Okay, I know it's not popular to use right now, but Russian peasant agriculture was extremely, it was subsistence agriculture. Okay, it was very primitive. People still were using wooden plows. In the American West, they already used whatever, I wouldn't say machines, but some like steel plows made of steel. Okay. They used mechanical threshers in Minnesota, for instance. I read about it in 1870s. But not in the Russian countryside, I didn't see this stuff.
I think there's also like an aspect of like with the Westerners' point of view, I think everybody kind of shares that, or it was like, for some way you did see that Russia was kind of like lagging behind a lot of other places, so they probably wanted to like skip ahead a little bit instead of taking those steps to like really secure their foundation and what they like had in terms of like wheat and like a lot of like space to grow certain things. They probably wanted to like skip ahead to be on a level playing field with some of their like people they viewed as enemies too.
Yes, to skip and to reach a particular utopian stage. It's a utopia what they viewed, because with all due respect, because they had these noble ideals, it was unrealistic to expect from peasant subsistence agriculture to become the foundation of Russia. Okay, so how is country going to exist? It needs factories, it needs industry, you know, railroads. But they kind of swept it under the rug. They didn't like to talk about it. What concerned them? Liberation of peasants at first before 1861. Okay, and they did play their role in kind of advancing the cause of liberation. And after peasants were liberated, they started to attack the government for what? For liberating peasants with this huge mortgage for 49 years, okay, when it was not total liberation from their viewpoint. And indeed, they were right in this case, okay? It was not liberation because peasants were forced to pay for the land they received from the government because this money went to the landlords because the Tsar represented the interest of this class of people, okay? So how can you avoid this? And that's what they pointed. They said, the government cheated peasants, government decided at the expense of the peasants to pay landlords, and basically it was not liberation, it was partial liberation, then they were still in bondage, and indeed they were still in bondage, okay?